AskReddit. What has been the most heartbreaking thing you've personally witnessed? Shit, okay, here shows my age, but as a cool kid say, whatever. Back in about 1992, I was walking to a friend's place when with no tire scream, there's a horrific car crash. I ran over to see a car had T-barred another at a roundabout. Canberra is full of them. Seeing as it was about 1 AM, and at the time this being nothing more than a sleepy hollow, a few people came out to investigate. At this point, my street, John's training kicked in, and I told someone to go call an ambulance. The situation is thus, the driver who rammed the other car smells like a brewery and is dead. He's also the driver who caused the accident by pushing through the roundabout. I get to the other car, and there's a girl. She's pretty messed up. The steering column has punctured her in the chest. There's blood everywhere. There are no crumple zones, so her own car is smooshed against her. I tell her that I know first aid and that I'm not trying to grope her as a joke, trying to figure out the extent of her injuries. But I can feel all her ribs on her left side fucked up, and even at the lightest tough, she's hurting. So I start talking to her, saying everything's alright. Well, it's not, but the ambulance is coming, and start making shitty jokes at her to keep her awake. Then I hear the ambulance in the distance and tell her she's gonna be alright. She looks me in the eye and says, "Why didn't I meet you earlier?" and dies. Turns out, 30 seconds can be an eternity. It was about 2 AM on a rainy Monday night, and I was driving home through empty suburbs in Sydney. Suddenly I turned into a smallish road and was blocked off by an ambulance. I was about to reverse and find another way when I see two paramedics bring out an old lady on the trolley who was very much dead. These three were followed by a very old man, probably 80 plus, who followed behind trying to hold the woman's hand. He was bawling, falling over himself, getting soaked by the rain and shouting. He was shouting, "She's my soulmate. What do I do now? What am I supposed to do?" Something about an older proud man brought to their knees kills me. I finished my PhD last year and just had my graduation ceremony last week. For ages before it my parents had been fussing over me, but I didn't mind. They were just so proud and excited, and to be honest I was feeling pretty good about myself too. So anyway, the ceremony rolls around, and the university registrar is reading out all the names, one course at a time, when I notice there is one name on its own in the program. Receiving the posthumous award of PhD, Mr. Blank on behalf of his daughter Dr. Blank. As they read out the names, all of the university higher-ups gave this chap the biggest standing ovation. You could tell he was so deeply proud of his daughter, thankful for the reception of the whole graduation team, and absolutely heartbroken and tearing up at the same time. There were so many people visibly crying in the audience, and it seemed to resonate really strongly with me. It was such a big day for me and my family, and seeing the pride and sadness on this man's face really made me realize how important it is to appreciate family while they are still around. When I was a patient at Research Psychiatric Center, there was a woman who had been there for a few days before I taken in, and who remained there for a week after I was out. She would rarely talk, was completely unfocused, and they were switching so many medications around on her that she spent most of the day sleeping in her room. Eventually, in one of our group sessions, she began to open up about what it is that brought her to the hospital. This woman was in her early 40s and had two daughters. The first one died 6 months prior to her entering the hospital. Then, a week before she came in, her second daughter was killed in a car wreck. And 2 days before she was taken to the hospital, her house caught fire due to faulty wiring and everything that she owned was lost. We all tried to console her as best as we could, and by the time I left 2 weeks later, she was actively engaging in conversation and even smiling a bit. She even spoke of how she was working with a friend to try and open a small business. The amount of tragedy this woman had gone through, and her ability to survive it all, put things in perspective for a lot of us. When I was about 14, my mom was bringing me and my friends back home from school. We all lived about 4 blocks from each other. We noticed there was an accident on the street before mine. After we got home we all, excluding my mom, walked to the accident to be idiot spectators. We approached a group of people that had already gathered and asked what happened. It turns out that a guy was riding his motorcycle back home because his wife's baby shower was winding down. Well, as he was turning onto his street, a driver plowed right into him, and he was killed instantly. He was about 5 houses away from his home. His wife was just sitting on the side of the road in shock. We left after that. I've never felt so bad in my life for being curious about a traffic accident in my life. I was driving down my street one day, and there was a dead bunny in the road. Right next to it, there was another bunny, just looking at the dead one. I had somewhere to be, so I couldn't stop. About 3 hours later, I'm coming home, and still, the bunny's looking at the dead one, in the exact same spot. I can't be sure, but I have a feeling he never moved. I went home, and got some lettuce, then walked back to the bunny. I was sure he was going to bolt, but he stayed still. I sat down, gave him some lettuce, and talked to him. He ate the lettuce almost absent-mindedly, just staring at the dead bunny. You could almost see the sadness in this little guy's eyes. After about 10 minutes, I decided to give him some privacy. As I got up to go, I noticed, in the mess, that was the dead bunny, were what looked like little baby bunnies. The poor thing had been pregnant. I cried as I walked home. The next day, the road people had gotten the dead bunny, and the guy I gave lettuce to had gone. Broke my heart. Watching my father descend into the grip of Alzheimer's. He's been battling it for the past 6 years. They don't tell you the truth about Alzheimer's in the books or in the movies. They don't tell you that the person who has it has a complete personality change. My father was the greatest dad any child could have, loving, caring, wonderful. He now is mean and physically abusive. He and my mother were passionately in love throughout the 40 years of their marriage. He recently ran her out of the house, threatening her life. They don't tell you that they go crazy at the end of the disease. They don't tell you that they see and talk to people that aren't there. They don't tell you that they can't go to the bathroom without help at the end. I'm only 27 years old. My father is 72, and he's completely gone. We've had to put him in a psych ward for dementia patients. They call it senior care. He hasn't said my name in over 2 years. He has no idea who I am, and it breaks my heart every single day. I went to school with literally the sweetest girl to ever exist. She suffered from some genetic disorder and was morbidly obese. I mean really obese, biggest I've ever seen. She gave a class presentation on her disorder before, but I don't remember the details. Anyways, she was known for being the biggest person in the school. Quite some time ago, when I was in junior high, my entire school was at some assembly. They were drawing names for a prize of a £5 chocolate bar. Of course, she won it. The entire gymnasium burst into laughter as she walked up to claim her prize. Her eyes were teary on the way back, but she just sat down and didn't say a word to anyone. I wanted to disappear. I can only imagine how she felt. Flash forward to graduation. A good friend of mine asked her to dance with him and told her she looked beautiful. She was so flattered that she bawled. Edit, thought I should add this. When my friend asked her to dance, she thought he was joking. Kids can be assholes. Today, while at work, library, a man came in, and one of our regular patrons, a teen who's probably 15 or 16, came running up to him and gave him a hug. Turns out, the man is the teen's father. Now, through 2 years of seeing this kid almost every day, I know a few things about him. He's in foster care. His mom OD'd last year. He grew up on the streets. He was abused by several of his mom's boyfriends. So I was surprised to see he had a dad, honestly. But it became quickly apparent to everyone else that the dad wasn't that into seeing his son. But the boy could not see that. He was talking all about his life, his group home, his younger brothers, etc. Then he says, "Why don't we go to lunch? Let's go to Wendy's right across the street." The dad goes, "Sure, let me go get my wallet. I'll be right back." And he walks out the door and doesn't come back at all. This kid stood in the middle of the library for like an hour, then went back and forth between us and Wendy's for the rest of the day. A co-worker and I ended up sitting in the parking lot with this kid for like 2 hours after we closed, just letting him cry. This is a teenager who has seen and experienced the very worst things, many of them probably at the hands of his father, and yet he wanted so desperately to be part of his life. I've literally never felt so gutted in my life. All I want to do is tell this story to Liam Neeson See the rage simmer, and then set him loose on this scumbag.